Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Stench of Truth Radio here on blogtalkradio.com/The Stench of Truth. My name is Ted Torbich. I am known as Tenebris T. I have a channel on YouTube, also under the username Tenebris T. My show there is also called The Stench of Truth. On YouTube, I talk about politics and economics primarily, although I do touch upon some esoteric topics from time to time. What we do here on the Stench of Truth Radio is talk about the paranormal, the esoteric, the occult, and all other strange and bizarre aspects of reality. Synchronicities, symbolism, you name it, we talk about it. Now, I am hopeful today that I will be able to bring my scheduled guest onto the show, and that would be Linda Moulton Howe. We had confirmed earlier this week for the show today, but I have not been able to connect with her as of yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a short introduction and biography and introduce you to her materials. Then I will try to connect with her again, and we'll see if we can get the show going. If I am unable to get through to Linda today, hopefully we'll be able to reschedule at a future time. And then we can decide what we want to do with the rest of the show. We may continue talking about the issues that I did want to talk about with Linda today, or we may go in a different direction. So we'll see how that works out. But as for right now, my scheduled guest is Linda Moulton Howe, and you can find a very nice biography for her at coasttocoastam.com. And that gives a little brief biography that I'm going to read right now. Linda Moulton Howe is a graduate of Stanford University with a master's degree in communication. She has devoted her documentary film, television, radio, writing, and reporting career to productions concerning science, medicine, and the environment. Ms. Howe has received local, national, and international awards, including 3 regional Emmys, a National Emmy nomination, and a Station Peabody Award for medical programming. Linda's documentaries have included A Strange Harvest and Strange Harvests 1993, which explored the worldwide animal mutilation mystery. Another film, A Prairie Dawn, focused on astronaut training in Denver. She has also produced documentaries in Ethiopia and Mexico for UNICEF about child survival efforts, and for Turner Broadcasting in Atlanta about environmental challenges. In addition to television, Linda produces reports and edits the award-winning Science, Environment, and Earth Mysteries news website, earthfiles.com. In 2003, Earthfiles received an award for Standard of Excellence presented by the Internet's Web Award Association. Earthfiles also received the 2001 Encyclopedia Britannica Award for Journalistic Excellence. Linda also reports science, environment, and earth mysteries news for Clear Channel's premier radio networks and UnknownCountry.com. In 2005, she traveled to Amsterdam, Hawaii, and several other U.S. conferences to speak about her investigative journalism. In 2004, Linda was on-camera TV reporter for the History Channel's documentary Investigation of an Unusual August 2004 Cow Death in Farnham, Nebraska. In November 2009, Linda was videotaped in Roswell, New Mexico to provide document research background for a 1940s American policy of denial in the interest of national security about spacecraft and non-human body retrievals for a 2010 History Channel TV series, Ancient Aliens. In 2010, Linda was honored with the 2010 Courage in Journalism Award at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. by the Paradigm Research Group's X Conference. She has traveled in Venezuela, Peru, Brazil, England, Norway, France, Switzerland, the Netherlands, Yugoslavia, Turkey, Ethiopia, Kenya, Egypt, Australia, Japan, Canada, Mexico, the Yucatan, and Puerto Rico for research and productions. Her website is earthfiles.com, and in the earthfiles.com shop, you can find her products, which include Mysterious Lights and Crop Circles, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 1, Facts and Eyewitnesses, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, High Strangeness, An Alien Harvest, A Strange Harvest, which is a documentary film, and Strange Harvests 1993, which is another documentary film. So you can also order those on her website at earthfiles.com, which also she is a regular guest on Coast to Coast. She's on quite often on Coast to Coast, and she talks about environmental issues, astronomical issues, which is what Earth Files focuses on. So right at the moment, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be off the air for a moment while I try to connect with her, and hopefully we'll be able to get her on the show. So just hang in there for a moment while I try to connect. Okay, everybody, I have Linda on the line. She had a last-minute caller that called her at the same time I called her, so we had a little bit of cross-connection there. So anyway, she's on the line. So what we were going to talk about today, now, of course, many of you will know Linda from her work with cattle mutilation and environmental and medical research and documentaries and writing as well, particularly on Coast to Coast in recent years. She has done a lot of this type of reporting. And while that would be the main focus for some of her research, I did want to take the time to talk to her about some environmental things that have happened over the past 2 years, including the Gulf oil disaster and the Japanese Fukushima Daiichi nuclear crisis that they're having over there. And, of course, hopefully we will also have a chance to talk about UFOs and cattle mutilations as well, because those are interesting topics to me. But right now I'm going to bring her on the line and welcome Linda Moulton Howe. Hi, Linda. Hey, Linda, how are you?
I'm fine. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you just fine. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Well, and it is interesting that there is so much going on in the world that 3 or 4 or 5 minutes before your broadcast was to begin, that when I got a phone call thinking it was you, that it was a beekeeper in the United States, because I'm working on an environmental story in addition to Real X-Files about what is happening to the pollinators. And I can just give you one piece of news. 2 years ago was the lowest honey production ever on record in history in the United States. They were at least 40% down. And he said, if the beekeepers weren't splitting all of their hives, you can do this with bees up to a certain point. You can keep splitting them and calling each split a colony, and it means that you start out with healthy bees, and by the time you have split them so many times just trying to get numbers, the health of the bees goes down. Their productivity in making honey goes down, and that is the state now. The bees are not healthy. Beekeepers are still struggling to meet their commercial contracts. And as you and I and your listeners know, if we don't have bees, we are not going to be able to sustain things like almonds and berries and strawberries and a huge number of apples and so forth, because they are the only pollinators of those kinds of foods. And right now the question on his mind and mine and so many people is, what in the world is happening in this planet, because it's at least a North American problem that is causing the decline of the pollinators, especially the honeybees, to the point that the beekeepers themselves wonder what the future will be and will they have any to work with over the next 10 years. It's a really serious story, no matter what else is going on, that the fact that there is the decline of so many different types of life forms on Earth now is a really, really dangerous and troubling subject that I'm dealing with a lot at earthfiles.com.
Indeed. And, I guess it's rather interesting and coincidental, if we could use that word, that the bee issue come up again, because we did want to talk about some environmental issues today. And, I think it's really important that you mention this topic right here, Linda, because for a long time now, there has been a problem with the bee population, and there has been a serious decline in bee populations. And it seems to me that, to a large extent, this issue has been largely swept under the rug in recent memory, as far as the mainstream media goes. And
yes, and to underscore what you have just said, one of the most dismaying articles that I have seen in my entire professional career as an investigative journalist was the New York Times. It was approximately 4 months ago, headlined an article about how the United States Army, working with a bee group in Montana called Bee Alert, that they had come to the conclusion that there was a very specific kind of, I started to say virus, and it's not a virus, it's not a bacteria, it is Nosema. Nosema is a really odd life form, probably in a fungi category. But that was the New York Times. Colony collapse disorder solved, Bee Alert, working with the Army, this is the answer. Well, I had just talked with a series of people in the apiary world, the Department of Agriculture, and I knew for a fact that Nosema was not the answer to colony collapse disorder. It is a terrible problem with bees. It is not the source of colony collapse disorder, which was first reported by a beekeeper named Hackenberg in Pennsylvania in the fall of 2006, when he lost 40 to 50% of all of his bee colonies and called up Penn State and the University of Pennsylvania and said, my God, what is going on? I've been a beekeeper for 35 years. I have never had anything like this happen. That was the beginning of colony collapse disorder, because it spread all over the United States. It's in Canada. It's in England. It's all over. Well, here then, in the beginning of it was the beginning, I believe, either right in January of 2011 or right at the end of 2010, the New York Times, with all of, we'll call it the reputation of the New York Times, carrying in that headline an answer to the uneducated population that this is the answer, when they are completely distorting something. And here is the truth. The company that the reporter from the New York Times discussed the situation with was getting money from the Army, was getting money to report some kind of a biased answer that would have nothing to do with pesticides, because where was the money coming from? The money was coming from Bayer Corporation in Germany that produces all of the nicotine-based pesticides that I remember Dave Hackenberg in Pennsylvania, the very first interview with a beekeeper that I did was with Dave Hackenberg back in February of 2007. And he said, Linda, I and other beekeepers feel that what is at the bottom of this is this new nicotine-based pesticide. And back then, it was the one that they were focused on was called imidacloprid. And imidacloprid is made by Bayer. And what was the next around clothianidin. Clothianidin Bayer came up with because their patent was, you know, how you have an exclusive monopoly on selling something until the patent runs out. So the patent was running out in imidacloprid, and so Bayer comes up with an even worse nicotine-based pesticide called clothianidin. And over the since January, I received a copy of the leaked Environmental Protection Agency document. All of this is at earthfiles.com, my news website. All you have to do is go to www.earthfiles.com, and up in the upper left there is a quick search, and you can type in clothianidin or Bayer or colony collapse disorder or even honeybees. If you type in honeybees, probably 60 reports will come down. I've done a lot of work on this. But here is the bottom line. In this huge 45-some page Environmental Protection Agency inside memo that was leaked to some people in the honeybee business, as long ago as I'm trying to remember the date on this. The date, I believe, was in 2010, but it was based on work that the EPA had been doing concerning bears, what they have requests for registrations. And when corporations put in the United States requests for registration, it is a process in which they have a product and the EPA has to give a stamp of approval. That's what it's about. Mm-hmm. And going back at least 6 or 7 years, Bayer's requests for registrations were approved by the Environmental Protection Agency every time, even when their own inside scientists were saying clothianidin kills, that's the verb, kills bee larvae. Clothianidin is a toxin to the honeybee world. It's all through this report. When it was leaked, there was a firestorm throughout the world, throughout England. There was a call to Parliament in London that they put a stop to the Bayer nicotine pesticides. In the United States, I have a letter that was signed by 6 different managers of different bee associations and apiary associations in the United States that went to Lisa Jackson, who is the current director under the Obama administration for the Environmental Protection Agency, and they are laying out an exquisite letter because it was concise on 2 pages and went to the very heart of what EPA had in their own memo leaked to the world. And we're saying we are, based on your information inside the Environmental Protection Agency, we are calling for you, Lisa Jackson, head of the Environmental Protection Agency, to put a stop to any approval, to make it a block, put a block on clothianidin and all associated nicotine-based pesticides. It took 2 months for Lisa Jackson, whose salary and department is paid for by taxpayer dollars, who is supposed to be representing the interests of the American people and plants and animals as the Environmental Protection Agency, and basically blows off the letter, the leaked memo, as if there is nothing wrong. And there are meetings going on all over the United States and Canada now as we speak. One will be in Santa Fe this weekend. Beekeepers who are beyond frustration, because what does it mean when we are now in 2011 and the so-called American government agencies that originally were designed, in the case of EPA, to protect the environment, are in fact in bed with the corporations and the government administrators who are all wired together through money. Money is the only bottom line anymore. Money is the only leverage point. And that means that the corporations that are producing the lethal toxins that are killing honeybees are the ones being protected now by the Environmental Protection Agency and the attitudes and policies of the United States government. It is incomprehensible.
It is, and it's a disaster, is what it is, and it does illustrate something that I have a great deal of problems with, and that is the revolving door between government and corporations.
Right.
One would wonder how many people who work in the Environmental Protection Agency are former members of Bayer and other producers of pesticides and chemical manufacturers who are in on all of the approvals and the requests for scientific data when it comes to new products and the chemicals development and their impacts on the environment. I wouldn't be surprised if a large portion of people who work for the EPA were former members of Bayer.
Yes, it is extremely incestuous, and the big question for all of your listeners, for everyone in the United States, what do we do when the government of the United States is no longer anything like a government of the people, by the people, for the people? That we lost a long time ago. This is a charade. It is as if the so-called elections are continued and go forth, generating all of this money for the same corrupt, incestuous politicians getting money from corporations who keep projecting themselves into the future as controllers of the United States, while in fact the elections really, truly are meaningless, and the Americans, whether you're a Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, it doesn't matter anymore. Everybody knows that the United States of America is sick. Nothing is working the way it was supposed to. And what do we do when there's no leverage point? What do you do when the Environmental Protection Agency basically blows off the people who are trying and struggling desperately to keep their honeybee business going when they would like to throw in the towel because it's so difficult?
Indeed, and that is the $64,000 question when it comes to issues like this. What exactly do we do? What are our options? I mean, we as people really have no leverage whenever money is the sole deciding factor in who is elected and what laws are passed and what regulations are enforced. If companies like Bayer can routinely go around regulatory agencies and or get themselves rubber stamped because they have the clout and the money to do so, how can the people have an effect in our government anymore? And what can we do to change that?
I wish I had an answer, because
so do
another what is a corollary to the question you just posed is there anyone left anywhere in the United States of America who believes anything that their state, local, and federal government tells them anymore? And rhetorically, I'm asking that because I think that the answer for the vast majority of Americans at the truth level, I'm not talking about the political lip service level, at the truth, what people feel actually in their gut and inside themselves, is no, that they do not believe anybody who is holding any kind of an elected office anymore. Therefore,
Indeed.
What is the government of the United States?
Well, I guess the best way I could describe it is it's a fascist corporatocracy. It's a means to further the corporate agenda, to enrich multinational corporations, and to make up any shortfalls they have for doing that. They attack social programs and other things that affect people. And of course, if there's money to be made, then, and it means bees die, then I guess bees are going to die, because that's where the money's at. And that's a sad reality. And it is.
And in the context of this, which we're talking current American modern day political corporate situation, when you jump back to World War II, when the United States was trusted around the world as a country that stood for trying to be fair, being willing to get into World War II, and it was with the U.S. joining in with England to fight Germany that everything began to turn around, and for a long time, I would say the United States was considered a large hero in the planet. However, one of the ironies is that because of a leak of documents, I would say not really a leak, kind of the official dump from the Ministry of Defense, as they have been doing for the last 2 or 3 years, taking their so-called UFO file, separating it out into several hundred files per dump on the Internet through the National Archive in England. And when you go through what they have distributed, the truth is 90% of it is just filler. But there is 10% that is really quite fascinating. And one of the last ones, not this most recent one, where they admitted, finally, the MOD in England admitted that they had 8,600 files on RAF Bentwaters that have just conveniently disappeared after years of saying they had nothing. Literally, the MOD has played this shell game. They have nothing. There was nothing to RAF Bentwaters. There was no national security issue. And then suddenly in 2011, they put out this caveat in their last dump of files, the so-called UFO desk files, that 8,600 RAF Bentwaters files are mysteriously missing. I'm serious. Well, that's not true. It's the same issue in the United States with the CIA, NSA, DIA, and RO, and all the alphabet soup. They have Suitland, Maryland, where they have archives of all of the what they would consider to be compromising documents if they have kept them, if they haven't shredded them, and that we are at a point where, looking back in history, and why the Ministry of Defense even let this particular memo out about 5 months ago, I'm not sure. I did a big, big story on this at earthfiles.com, and all you have to do is search Churchill, that was the Prime Minister in World War II in England, or Eisenhower, who was our general in World War II and a colleague of Winston Churchill, and Dwight D. Eisenhower became president after World War II, after Truman. But the important part is that the Ministry of Defense, whether they knew what they were releasing and did it on purpose or not, there was a letter that I and others found that was from a man who was describing himself as the grandson, and that his grandfather had been on the security force surrounding and protecting Winston Churchill, then Prime Minister, and that the date of the year was 1943, and that the letter writer was writing to the Ministry of Defense to say, I think that this should be on the record that my grandfather overheard a discussion between Prime Minister Churchill and then General Dwight D. Eisenhower of the United States, in which they were discussing a craft that was round, that was disc-shaped, that went spinning around what back then would have been the war airplanes, and that the disc was so advanced, was able to move so rapidly, stop on a dime, and they were discussing all of the aerodynamic feats of this disc that was being watched, monitored by it was UK pilots in planes, and that the security guard overheard Winston Churchill say to Dwight D. Eisenhower, this must be put under a lid of secrecy for at least 50 years, or we will upend religion, the stock market, and social fabric, and so forth and so on. And if that's true, then it means that Churchill and Eisenhower made an agreement with each other that then somehow became formalized in their respective governments as a policy of denial about the truth of a completely non-terrestrial, non-human technology and intelligence on Earth, and they knew it. a policy of denial in the interests of national security. And now it is 60 years later. That policy of denial that I understand was put in effect by top secret classified executive orders has never been lifted. And you now know from where we started about all of the money corporation link to the current government, that for 60 years ago, that our governments have, the UK and the American, have evolved on a foundation of lies, allegedly to protect the populations from the possibility of being affected by the truth that we're not alone in the universe, that there are other intelligences interacting with this planet, there are technologies that can outstrip anything that we have, and they knew that in World War II. And it is now 2011 going forward in the 21st century. And this is the ultimate, to me, the ultimate issue facing humanity on the planet. How do 6.5 billion people continue to allow the so-called government leaders and their military who have the guns to continue going forward with policies of lies about something as important as we are not alone in the universe, that there has been interaction with this planet by very advanced intelligences, not only from the 20th and the 21st century, but going back probably for millions of years. The human family, the entire human family, deserves to know everything that the so-called government knows about it.
Indeed, it does. And it sounds like what you've discovered there in Britain is a direct precursor to what the Brookings Institute released in the early 1950s in their report about revealing the existence of extraterrestrial life and why they justified a reason for it to be kept secret for similar reasons. Maybe they modeled their report on the British example that came before them.
Yeah, I think so. What I was saying and what I think is clear in the MOD release is that Churchill and Eisenhower were the two major leaders in World War II that would have set the tone for the policies concerning discs and non-human intelligences going forward from thereafter. And Churchill is the one who allegedly said to Eisenhower, we must put a lid of secrecy on this for 50 years to avoid upending basically the world. I disagree. I do not think Prime Minister Churchill was right. I do not think Dwight D. Eisenhower was right. I do not think Truman was right. I think that's where the first mistakes were made. The answer should have been, let's just go to the world, let the chips fall where they may. Let's tell everyone this is what we are learning. We don't have the answers. We need the entire planet to be reporting what they see, what is happening. We need everyone reporting so the whole planet, everyone is involved in who are they, what are they, why are they here, and what are they doing. Can you imagine what a different history, that there wouldn't have been trillions of black dollars going into all of the unknown black budgets over all of the decades that were focused on the development of all these secret intelligence agencies that go out and collect whatever or try to shoot down or whatever they have been doing trying to get this technology, and then knowing that all of these policies of lies that were set in official motion become the curdling, rotting inside of government. You put any group of people centered around a lie as a policy to go forward, it is worse than 1984 speak. This is the curdling of the political system of the UK and the US. It started with the lies about the discs, the non-human intelligences, and our relationship as a planet to the universe. Those lies should never have started in the first place.
I agree completely, and especially about very important philosophical issues. The government has no business being in the business of lying on those subjects or keeping information secret on those subjects. One could argue perhaps that a government has a need for secrecy on certain issues, but when it comes to major impacting things on people and humanity in general, I think they have no business being involved in secrecy about any of these topics. And
right, and look what we're going through on Osama bin Laden.
That's
I
right.
do not understand why, for 30 seconds or 1 minute, the SEALs and their surrounding military intel special operations group could have propped up that man and simply said this statement: "This is Osama bin Laden. We have shot him under 2 presidential orders because of his ordering the attack on New York, Washington, and Pennsylvania on September 11th of 2001. We are now going to bury him at sea so that no one can ever build a shrine to this murderer." Then that's the end of the videotape. Everybody in the world has seen it's Osama bin Laden with bullets in his head and his chest, and you would not have the mess that it's moving into now, where even though people are saying, yes, I saw photos, and yes, it's dead, and yes, it was Osama bin Laden, and yes, we have DNA, that's not the way to do business. And the president, all due respect, President Obama, when he says we have no need to spike the football, I am sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but at least being straightforward for 30 seconds or 1 minute to the entire globe with the fact that we took out Osama bin Laden for good reason under 2 presidential orders, and this is why it was done, this is how it was done, and here he is, you wouldn't have had the firestorm of conspiracies that began within an hour of the Sunday White House press conference. Yeah. And that's what I mean. It is as if our government is no longer capable of being straightforward about anything.
Yes, indeed. And of course, all the blame, as you rightly say, is on the administration. It's on the government itself, because almost immediately they started to change their story. And that's the usual case for whenever they're trying to cover up for missteps or problems with the original story. Absolutely.
People, if there's truth, no one has a reason to change the story. It's only when there are policies of lies that we constantly get this morphing facts. And I want to, if I can, I'll jump the track here for a moment to make a very dramatic point coming through my work in the animal mutilation phenomena, which has gone on for at least a century. There are cases that go back through BBC files and a journal all the way back to 1911, when 104 sheep were found in an Australian billabong with the ear, eye, tongue, jaw flesh, genitals, and rectum cord out, no blood on 104 of those sheep, no tracks of any kind around those sheep. It is as if they had been taken someplace, all the excisions done, no blood, then they were laid back on the Australian billabong. So for everybody who is listening, know that the animal mutilation phenomenon goes back at least a century and starts out at that high strangeness and comes up every decade with Americans and Canadians finally catching on to what was happening in 1967 with the very famous Colorado case where the reporter got the name wrong. It wasn't Snippy, it was Lady. It wasn't a gelding, it was a female, which underscores how reporters can get so many things wrong. But nevertheless, it was the first worldwide reported case where a horse was stripped of flesh from the neck up. The brain had been removed. All the internal chest organs had been removed. There was no blood. There was no blood anywhere on the hair. There was no blood anywhere on the ground. You tell me anyone anywhere who can remove the flesh, the brain, and the internal organs from any animal on any ground and not have blood everywhere. It's not possible.
No.
So here is this huge mystery, and it makes these worldwide headlines. I don't come into the story until September of 1979, 31 years ago. I was director of special projects at the CBS station in Denver, and my task was to do 3 or 4 documentary films a year, live studio programs with an audience having to do with everything from, it could be environmental challenges, political issues. I covered a huge, wide variety of subjects, as I do now at Earth Files. And I wanted to get to the bottom of the reoccurring. The animal mutilations in Colorado and the surrounding states have been going on with great ferocity since around 1970-71, after the 1967 event. And there were lots of associations with discs and helicopters that evaporated into clouds in the sky, and clouds that changed into helicopters, and just really weird stuff associated with the animal mutilations. And because I was head of the department at the CBS station, I decided that I wanted to get to the bottom of what I wasn't sure what it was. And I ended up 9 months, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. It was probably the hardest continual, nonstop work for 9 months that I have ever done in my entire career, before or since. But you work at such a pitch when you know that you are inside of a story that is so big, that is affecting so many people and animals. It is global. It is happening in 2 hemispheres, and every government official that you go to denies that it even is there. And when, whatever I am, whatever is inside of me, my entire life, I hate lies. I really honor the pressure of fact and truth. Mm-hmm. And when you know that you are going out into a field with sheriffs and deputies, and the sheriff is saying to you, Linda, we're dealing with creatures from outer space. I heard it over and over and over again. And they would say, we saw beams come down in the pasture. A rancher would say, I saw one of my cattle go up in a beam of light into something in the sky, and then I found it mutilated. All of that I was hearing in the fall, winter of 79 into the spring of 1980. That first special that I did was broadcast as a 2-hour special on May 25th, 1980, A Strange Harvest. It got a regional Emmy, and it was how to put this, it isn't Linda who is telling, I put it together and I'm the reporter, but when you watch A Strange Harvest, you're hearing the sheriffs, the deputies, the district attorney's office, the ranchers, you're hearing the people who had to be involved with the animal mutilations, telling firsthand their experiences, their knowledge, their files, what they've seen with their eyes, looking at photographs of these odd, strange lights in the sky, hearing the head of the district attorney's investigation on animal mutilations down in Trinidad, Colorado. His name was Lou Girodo, and he's looking right at me with the camera running at 10 o'clock in the evening in October of 1979, and he said, when I asked him, I was asking everybody the same question, who or what is killing and mutilating these animals and why? He looked me straight in the eye. He is heading the animal mutilation investigation for the DA's office in Trinidad. Well, Linda, other investigators and I have come to the conclusion that we're dealing with creatures from outer space. And then he proceeds to tell why. The orange lights that they have seen in over the pastures where they have found the mutilated animals, that he himself with a deputy had watched a big moon, like a full moon-sized fluorescent orange light split into 2 orange spheres in front of them out over a valley where they were parked because of the animal mutilations. And then to their complete and total amazement, they watched these orange lights or spheres or discs or whatever they were that were glowing orange but circular. One went south, one went north. Then they get a report from radar at Stapleton Airport in Denver that they've got an unidentified that is moving rapidly south to north. And Lou Girodo said, by God, I bet it's that thing we just saw split into. Then they see the 2 orange spheres come back over the valley. They're parked watching all of this. and they see the two orange spheres join together into one sphere again and go straight down into the ground. And I'm using Lou Girotto's words, into the ground. He said, the deputy and I looked at each other because we watched something that had split apart, was moving in the air, comes back together, joins together, and goes straight down. He says, Linda, where else can it have gone? We didn't see anything explode. We didn't see anything land. We saw it disappear into the ground. Well, I've talked with many people over the years who have seen very, very similar phenomena. Okay, so I do a strange harvest. There's no question that all the people that I interviewed, all the places the crew and I went, everybody is telling us these stories about lights and beams, and the pathologists who have confirmed that the excisions have been cut with high heat, collagen has been cooked, hemoglobin has been cooked. I'm reporting all of this physical evidence. It was like a bomb went off after A Strange Harvest was broadcast. We were getting thousands of letters from around the world because, remember, there's no computers, there's no email, there was not even fax. We had two means of communication, hard letters and the phone. That's it in 79 to 80. And so we had bags, thousands of letters started coming in, not only from the United States, but from around the world, of people talking about what they had seen, their own animal mutilations, entities in fields, helicopters that changed and morphed in the sky, all of the stuff that Lou Girotto had told us. And then you jump to 1989, and I finally put what I consider to be the best, hardest documents, photographs, evidence in the book, An Alien Harvest, because I had a publisher in New York who told me, we are interested in what you have learned about the government, but under no circumstances would we ever publish a single one of your animal mutilation photographs. That actually made me angry.
It would make me angry, too.
Yeah, the whole point is how pristine, bloodless, and neat this is. There's nothing gory. These are not gory. These are eerie scenes. And when the New York publishing world that has its hands around the complete and total control of what books make it into what is called the major lists, into the major distribution, and they are telling me under no circumstances, and I am the only, think about this, I am the only Emmy, Peabody, Emmys, Aviation Writers Awards. I had so many awards by the time that I had submitted a manuscript to this editor in New York, and he is saying under no circumstances would he ever publish a single photograph that I have amassed over 10 years. That, to me, was a red flag. They have something, somebody is putting a block inside of that large publishing company in New York on this subject. That's why I, Linda Howe, I published An Alien Harvest in a hardbound limited edition, and it was gone in 2 months, and that gave me courage to keep publishing. An Alien Harvest has never been out of print, and that it is, to me, it was one of the most important pieces of the work I've done, because I felt like the government is getting away with all of these spins, misinformation, and lies, and somebody has to put something out there that shows the real photographs, the real pathology, what is actually going on and being said that is in some kind of a paper form that you can carry around, share with others, and hold. Television is great and can reach a large audience for the moment that it is on, but it is very hard to keep going back. Well, back then you couldn't. You can't, it was television, it was broadcast, and then it's gone.
Right.
So that was why I did the book in 1989 and did it on my own, so I could put it in an 8.5 by 11 format, and you can clearly see every color photograph, read all the documents. It's done on really good paper. It was really important to me that this be something of high quality so that the world could not dismiss this huge phenomenon that was going on. Now, when in between between my broadcast and when the book came out, there was one other event that underscores the policy of lies from the large box of the federal government and the secret agencies down to the local sheriff's office. And this is what I'm going to tell you. When I was working on A Strange Harvest in 79 to its broadcast in May of 80, one of the people that I went to interview was a guy named Ken Rommel, Rommel. It was down in Raton, New Mexico, and he had gotten a grant. I cannot recall sitting here now whether it was for $119,000 or something like that. He was working in the DA's office in Raton, and he was a former FBI agent. Why he left the FBI, why he was in a district attorney's office in northern New Mexico, I have no idea. My suspicion is he never left the FBI. He never retired, that he was an FBI mole working in that Raton office. Because this is what happened when I went to do an interview with this Rommel, who allegedly had been given a relatively large grant for the size of the money at the time of 1980 to investigate specifically the facts, is the way I believe it said, the facts about animal mutilations. That's why I set up an interview with him. And we went into his office. The crew is setting up the camera and the lights. I have files and folders and photographs of mutilations that I want, my intent is, to lay them out in front of this man in New Mexico who has just gotten an announced grant to do an honest investigation of the animal mutilation phenomena, and I have extraordinary photographs, extraordinary pathologies. I have really hard evidence that something really weird is happening, and I put all this down in front of me while the crew is getting ready, and you know what this man says to me? Sitting down, and this is before the camera started. Linda, I'm going to prove that there's nothing to any of this but predators. And at that point, like going through Alice in Wonderland's mirror, where I thought I was going in to do a collaborative discussion with a person like myself who honestly wanted facts and to try to get to the bottom of a huge, gigantic mystery, that he was telling me before the cameras rolled that he already had a mission, a goal. He wasn't going to do an honest report. He was going to prove it was predators. And when we went into that interview, it was not pleasant because I was not going to sit and allow him to roll with predator as the answer, and I pulled out everything that I had. And it was a very contentious interview, and part of it was in my first 2 hours. Well, his report came out, I think it was July of 1980, because A Strange Harvest was broadcast May 25th, 1980. I remember it was about 2 or 3 months after my broadcast that his so-called official 304-page bound Rommel report was distributed to the media to be distributed to the public. I have a copy of the original bound Rommel report, and it is nonsense. I knew details about some of the cases, and his distortions, the whole thing was exactly what he warned me. He was going to prove it was predator, but that was a lie. So I knew that there was nothing in the Rommel report that had anything to do with objective fact or truth. And guess what happens next? The so-called Rommel report gets a feature play in Penthouse. I think it was Guccione's Penthouse. Was a big magazine back in 1980, and So I start getting calls and copies of this ridiculous interview from all over the country. Linda, what do you have to say on this Rommel report? He says it's birds, foxes, and so forth. And that the biggest piece that the Penthouse Rommel interview was about in this magazine was that a sheriff's office in Benton, Arkansas, had purchased the cow, put out a star scope camera, had run it all night. The cow, the sheriff's office had paid for, and they had killed. They knew that they had killed it, and they knew how they killed it. And they laid it out in a pasture, and they ran the camera all night in a star scope mode. And in the morning, here an ear was missing, an eye was missing, and all of the so-called mutilations, and of course it was predator. And this was reinforcing the so-called Rommel report. Everything about that article and that description of the Benton County Sheriff's Office was, to me, phony as a $7 bill. None of it made any sense whatsoever to my having spent more than a year with actual ranchers and real sheriffs and doing all the work I had done. So I called up the Benton County Sheriff's Office in Arkansas, and most everybody knew who I was by then.
Yes.
And there was no possibility to not say, this is Linda Moulton Howe. I am the director of special projects at the CBS station in Denver. I produce the film A Strange Harvest about the animal mutilation phenomena. I have been sent this article about the Rommel report from Penthouse, and it's saying that your office was able to establish with a starscope camera that this cow was mutilated, quote unquote, by foxes and birds. I would very much like to do an interview with the sheriff to discuss this research. Not one single opening. They stiff-armed me for 1 or 2 weeks. Nothing. That's right from the get-go. When you are an investigative reporter, and if you are worth your salt, it does not take you long in this world to know when you're dealing with honest people on honest subjects versus when you are dealing with somebody who is hiding, or they won't just stand up and do an interview with a reporter. I'm telling you, anytime you run into resistance, somebody is trying to rig. You're not dealing with honest people when you cannot get a straightforward interview, when you're being straightforward about the subject and why. So I was completely stiff-armed. I knew that it was a lie. I knew that the Benton County Sheriff's Office was allowing Rommel to use their name and them as a source for what was phony information. But you now have to go, that would have been in 1980. You now have to go all the way to 2004. This is now 7 years ago. 2 decades or so passed. I know it was 2004 in the spring because I moved to Albuquerque in November of 2004, and this was in the spring of that year. I get a phone call in my office in Philadelphia where I was living that spring. And the man says, Linda Moulton Howe? And I said, yes. Well, I am Dr. Blank Blanken, to respect his request still for anonymity. I know who this is. I knew who this was in terms of references in 1980, but he would never talk. Now, he's calling me in 2004. What is that, 24 years later? Mm-hmm. He's calling me. I knew the name. I had not forgotten it. And he went on, he said, I am the veterinarian who was doing the real necropsy work for the Benton County, Arkansas Sheriff's Office when the phony Rommel report was made national and international news through Penthouse magazine, and he said, all these years I've wanted to tell you the truth. And I'm assuming that he was sick, or there must have been a reason why he called me.
Right.
Okay? And he said, I want you to know that when they put out that story about the star scope and the cow, he said the truth was, I was doing real necropsies for the Benton County, Arkansas Sheriff's Office. I was doing necropsies in which, Linda, there were no surgical excisions in the bodies of those cattle. And I would open up a mutilated animal and there would be no bladder. There would be no esophagus, surgically removed, not a drop of blood inside. And he said, I'm reporting honestly that I'm opening up animals in which there's no external surgery, and there has been precise surgery on the inside of those animals. Now, when you realize, because what I'm telling you is absolute fact, I lived it, that between the completely salacious and dishonest international and national headlines about, I think the guy who did the interview with Rommel was named Rorvik. I think it's called the Rorvik interview in Penthouse magazine in, I think, July of 1980, was completely based on a phony 304-page report paid for by taxpayer dollars in the state of New Mexico to somebody who allegedly had left the FBI, and I doubt that, but that's the way they said, to prove, as he said to me, to my eyes, to my face, that there was nothing to animal mutilations except predators. So the whole thing was concocted, the wiring was in, it was rigged. They would put out this 304-page report, which only a half a dozen of us on the planet would ever read from cover to cover. I did, but nobody else. Who do you know reads 304-page bound government reports?
Not many.
Right? Okay.
Right.
And they do that on purpose. You hand somebody 304 bound pages, and they mentally and psychologically they just go ugh, and it sits on a shelf. And because how many people do you know, even inside yourself, and sometimes I catch myself feeling this, you have a big report and you know that you have to sit down and it's going to take hours to go through competently, and you just keep putting it off. But because it sits on a shelf, you somehow feel like you are somehow exposed to it, and you haven't read a word. Our congressional representatives now are guilty of this in spades every day of their lives. They're not reading anything that they are voting on. All this crap that is going through the congressional mill now that is corporately sponsored and everything else. Everything is corrupt and distorted. Well, the Rommel report was as corrupt and distorted as anything could possibly be, with the intent that it would be distributed in some sort of a mass readership rag. And therefore, only the headlines, which is about all that anybody ever seems to pay attention to, the headlines, Rommel proves predators, is what sticks. And it's a lie. So I'm giving you an insight of something that I lived, completely understood, knew all the players, and ended up with that 2004 phone call to me from the veterinarian who had felt guilty for more than 2 decades and wanted me to know that, yes, it was phony. Yes, he knew the truth, and so did the Benton County, Arkansas Sheriff's Department.
Yes, indeed, and I think that your inclination regarding the man's supposed leaving the FBI is probably correct, that he was still affiliated with them, if not actually an agent in place there, because it seems quite clear to me that the animal mutilation story was clearly covered up and shuffled to the side as being something not important, and, as you say, attributing it to predators when there's practically no logical reason or evidence to support that particular scenario.
There's
when
none.
it comes. Yes.
In the real cases of which I have investigated hundreds.
Yes.
When you go to the pathology of what has actually happened at the excisions, you are separating the whole predator disease, satanic cult world off in one direction, and you have to be dealing with the facts, and the facts are high heat of some sort has been applied to those excisions.
Yes, indeed, and of course, this harkens back to what we talked about earlier with the bees and colony collapse disorder. Whenever there's an agenda present, what happens is that there are certain elements that affect the so-called what goes for today as the pseudo-skeptical crowd who come out in force and pretend to be the scientific definers of what is true and what is not. And you have these, in some cases, they're corporate people. In other cases, they're supposed representatives of the government. And what they do is they set out the answer before they do the investigation. So what you had in that particular case is somebody told that guy, look, this is work of predators. Go prove it. So,
that's right.
Yes, so he puts together his report that proves it's predators, and that's the official line, and that's where we are. And
it's a lie.
It is indeed.
It's a lie. I'm
indeed.
here to tell you, it is a lie. And everybody who has ever investigated for real, I'm not saying sitting at home making phone calls. I have literally walked in pastures all over this planet. I have done so in Central America, in the United States, in England, in Australia. I have been all over, out in fields. I have taken formalin and scalpels, and I have gathered tissue for a pathologist, and I have gathered soil and plants for a biophysicist to look, and we have learned amazing, amazing things. I've reported it on the radio, I've reported it in Earth Files, I've reported it in books, and you find that hard physical evidence doesn't leverage open anything when the powers of the politic, the military and the administration have a firm policy of denial. To leverage that open with actual facts and evidence isn't going to work. I'm doing my best. I'm not pulling any punches. I have always reported what I have found, what I have been able to get information with people who should be considered medical, veterinarian, pathology, biophysicists, soil specialists, and so forth. And this is a very important point. You can have truth. You can have absolutely gold-plated, wonderful truth. And when you are up against a Mount Everest of lies and a policy of denial in the interest of national security, that mountain knows that it will always prevail until the policy of denial changes. So I look at my work and my life as David versus Goliath. I've really tried, and I'm going to keep on trying, to present to the public the facts that I find on any subject, environmental, science, or real X-Files. I will continue to the best of my ability to get multiple eyewitnesses to talk on the record when I can. We are living in a world where humans are more afraid of other humans' condemnation and ridicule and sarcasm than they are afraid of any extraterrestrial. And once you realize that you have all these subjects that are happening on the planet all the time, because I and others, we get, I think, pretty straightforward, honest reports from a lot of people, including tremendous numbers, in my case, from people who have served in the military, who have firsthand knowledge. They are still afraid for their families and for their own lives to talk on the record, but I learn a lot off the record. But unfortunately, off the record doesn't cut it when it comes to journalism. It helps me, it gives me a background, but it's the same problem that the New York Times and the Washington Post have about the so-called background sources. A background source just gives you some fabric in which to tell a story. Real journalism, which is not practiced very much anymore anywhere, but real journalism is hard. It's hard work. You have to be prepared to have as many no's as yeses. You have to try to get people to speak on the record in front of a camera, on an audio tape recorder, or your pencil in your notebook in the old-fashioned way. You find that people will tell you many things before you go on the record that they won't even say on the record, and then you have the frustration that you can go on the record with a report that you know has even more substantive information, but they're still afraid to tell X, Y, and Z. And then as a reporter, you're confronted with the dilemma. If you summarize information in your words that you've heard, in a sense you're violating a trust, and it is not your place to be the summarizer of new information. You need to get the first-hand people, whether they're military or intelligence or eyewitnesses, you need them to finally have the courage to go on the record with their real name, their real background, and they are the ones who say it in their words. That is pure traditional journalism. And let me tell you, when it's in this world, in this field, it is the hardest path. I often feel like a completely isolated fish swimming upstream, and that every once in a while I will get a letter that will be, or an email now in these days, an email from somebody who will say, please, their first sentence will be, please do not use this email and do not use my name. And people know that they can trust me. I am not going to violate requests for confidences. I couldn't have had a long career if I had. But when they start that way, I am going to pay attention to the content in those emails. And it is, to me, it has been rewarding to get information from people who obviously have firsthand information about the presence of non-humans, the back engineering of technologies, and what appears to me, how to put this, one man called it Earth's secret war. I think that may be true, but not in the sense that we think of bullets and guns and all that. Meaning that there's at least one non-human out there that probably has a tremendous amount of capability, and there's a lot of tension between it and the human presence. And I'm not sure that I understand that. As I say these words, I am not one to feel afraid, and I hope you and your listeners will join me in, I personally do not think there is anything to be afraid of, even those that are mutilating the animals. I have come to a conclusion myself that I feel I can say in some confidence, that the animal mutilations may serve 1,000 complicated, I'm going to say, reasons or agendas for non-humans that all add up to survival, a genetic harvest and survival. And when I say survival, I wrote about this in my very first book, An Alien Harvest, and I've written about it in the next books, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 1 and 2, and even in my book looking at the crop formations and mysterious lights and crop circles. There is a kind of a common theme, and that is life is not guaranteed on this planet, and that we are dealing with one or more advanced intelligences that I would say have demonstrated to the human abductees and to others that their survival may be at stake, and if their survival is at stake, our survival becomes part of the big box. And therefore, if we were in a healthy state that could have started with Churchill and Eisenhower, where the whole planet was trying to understand the who, the what, the why, the where, from, and the agendas, and that we had all been working through this together, and there would not be manipulation of the human race as there has been by both governments and whatever these intelligences are, that we might be at a place in 2011 where we already had gone beyond fossil fuels, where perhaps we were joining whatever is one or more of these intelligences with doing a straightforward settlement on Mars, that everything would have gone forward as an alliance of life that needs to survive, and in surviving, it needs each other no matter what timeline, how far in the future, whatever you are, that there is a necessity for life to find allies in order to survive past, present, and future. To me, that's how big this whole story is, and that for us to realize that tiny elites of populations called government leaders have made decisions using military and intelligence in a variety of nations for 60 years to keep a gigantic truth from a planet because they didn't want the stock market to fall, they didn't want religions to crumble, and all of the reasons that they give. And to find ourselves in this, I think, terribly vulnerable position where if you do not have knowledge, you are weak. If you do not have all the information as a citizenry that your government has, you are weak. People gain strength in knowledge because then you begin to understand. And in understanding, you begin to grow with nuances. And when you begin to have enough information and depth in subjects that you understand nuances, then you're not so afraid. And right now, we are on a planet where the governments or the non-humans, depending upon who decides to act first in finally showing some part of the truth, it could come as a major shock to the Homo sapien system. Whereas in World War II, the planet was already vulnerable to the shock of war. I personally think that would have been the perfect time to introduce that there were other things that we didn't understand what their motives were. Please don't be afraid. Just if you've got a camera, take photographs, report to us, and we'll just keep learning about this together. I think that would have been healthy. It would have been straightforward, and we wouldn't have had trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars over 60 years of taxpayer dollars and God only knows what other sources being devoted to covering up the back engineering of extraterrestrial technologies.
Well, let me say this, if I could, and correct me if I'm wrong here. Basically, your position vis-a-vis the non-human intelligences and Earth life, Homo sapiens, if you will, is that for whatever reason that we may not know at this time, the lives and survival of both of us are intertwined in a way, and somehow our continued existence and their continued existence are intertwined in a way, and this is why there's the interaction going on. Is that a fair statement to say?
Yes. Yes, I would say that is my perspective today, which is not to say that applies to every non-human intelligence. I don't have omniscience. I just have a sense that the mutilations, the animal mutilations, are being done for a very specific reason that has to do with survival. And that there is no... I guess I would say this to you and your listeners. Is there any evidence that you can point to at any century so far in human history that would seem to be a demonstration of wholesale onslaught against the human race by extraterrestrials in discs?
Well, I would say the only thing that comes to mind right off the top of the bat for me would be William Bramley's work
The Gods of Eden.
Yes, and talking about
the plague. The plague, and that would be an attack through disease, and that may be a perfect example of something that we would consider to be insidious attack.
Indeed.
But my question is, any demonstration anywhere in history of a wholesale onslaught by extraterrestrials in discs? I don't think so. I don't think there's not been anything that would be in the category of overt attack, overt aggression. You put your finger immediately on the one place that has been a question in my mind, Jim Marr's mind, Whitley Strieber's mind, others. Depending upon the agendas of the various non-humans, there may be some in which past, present, and future here is tied directly to their survival in past, present, future, wherever they are.
Mm-hmm.
But there may be others for which the population growth of Homo sapien on this planet is a problem. And there may be some sort of law that they can't attack an evolving life form if they are within some kind of legal jurisdiction. I mean, I know now I'm sounding like Star Trek and all of that, but I mean, saying that there may be some constraint on what other intelligences do from solar system to solar system and timeline to timeline. I don't know. Now I'm in the realm of just saying words that to some degree are sci-fi fiction, but nevertheless, what it does is it brings up the issue of multiple intelligences that could have varying agendas, and at least one type of non-human intelligence may want to cultivate planets that have biodiversity of life and as much water as this particular planet has, with the biodiversity that it has had, even though it's gone through cycles of mass extinction and being an icy snowball and all the things that the Earth has gone through. We are a planet of breathtaking biodiversity and all of that water, and that may be more unique, it may be more unique in this 13.7 billion light-year universe than we know. And it then might be that Homo sapien, which has only been around in its current form for about 35,000 years, I'm talking about the trailing out of Neanderthals and then the rise of Cro-Magnon, but it might be that whatever Homo sapien has been doing to the planet and its enormous population growth, that might be perceived as a problem to those that are that the value of Earth is its biodiversity, and then something like insidious disease, like the plague in the 1300s that took out one-third of Europe's population and was associated with dark cloaked figures with rods in their hand spraying. People saw the spray coming out of the rods. It was written about in historic old books, and that as soon as people saw the dark figures with the rods spraying, the next day the villagers would start dying from the plague. So there was that circumstantial link that these dark figures, and that's where the phrase, the figure of death with the scythe, that's where it comes from.
Yes.
Right?
And that of course would be another example of the men in black in history. Sort of enigmatic character that appears associated with UFO sightings and reports in modern ufology as well.
To this last few minutes, you can begin to understand that the layers that we are dealing with when it comes to this phenomena of other intelligences interacting with this planet is so complicated, and if it has been going on for 5,000 years of what's called current modern human history, and in perhaps millions of years before Homo sapien, then we are the current model of surface life, and we have no idea who might consider Earth to be theirs.
Indeed, and I don't think that anybody can, rightfully talk about this subject without entering the realm of speculation to some point, because, quite frankly, we just lack a tremendous amount of data with which to draw definitive conclusions about any of this. So I don't think that anybody could fault you for making speculative leaps as far as, various agendas and what have you. And I think it's also fair to say that there's nothing to prevent the idea that we're dealing with more than one entity or life force or whatever you want to call it throughout history, and even in varied cases. And right. So it's also fair to say and to speculate that you would be dealing with different agendas and different ideologies. And right. As you point out, there may be legal frameworks in place, but it may just simply be a different approach to ethics or something of this kind. Right. Like what I point out to people a lot of times is that when you're dealing with unknown entities, it's not fair to put a human moral system on them when it comes to right and wrong or good and evil, because they may not have similar terms in whatever realm they come from. And when we look at something, even like cattle mutilation, which, as you rightfully point out, should not be a cause of fear for people, even though it does on its surface appear to be threatening, what may in fact be going on may have no moral consequence for the entities or whatever it is that's doing this. But when we look at it, we give it a context based on our culture and our upbringing. And I think it's important to remember that as well, because, as I said, the idea of good and evil or right and wrong may be not the best terminology to use when talking about some of this stuff.
Yeah, and that's why I try really hard to communicate with any audience that if you just put that word survival in the front of your mind and say this is the template in which everything related to the UFO phenomena might be looked through, the survival lens, and then you consider some of the cases that have occurred. One that comes to mind, it was a medical doctor. It was in France. I cannot remember if it was in Paris or another city, but I remember that the doctor had gone out. He was crippled. That was the point. He was crippled in one leg. I believe it was a war wound. And he used a cane or a crutch or something like that. And he had moved out onto his balcony just because it was a beautiful evening. He sees what he thinks is a bright star, and the bright star starts getting brighter and brighter, and he is watching as this star becomes a craft. It moves right up outside of his balcony. A beam of white light is shined onto the medical doctor. It does not last very long. He wrote about this, and Jacques Vallée wrote about this in one of his books. And then the beam is shut off. The craft disappears, as seems to be the case, that whatever they are, they're either moving timelines, moving dimensions, have the ability to deflect photons, so they're visible only for a brief period of time for some reason, but have the ability to deflect photons. I don't know which it is, moving into another dimension, another timeline, or deflecting photons, but the appearance and disappearance is hand in glove with the technology, and it disappears. The doctor's leg was totally restored. That is one of the most famous cases. That man, that human being, was restored. And there was another very, very interesting case in South America. Goes back to 1955 or 56, somewhere in there. And the story was that an old man, most of his teeth had fallen out, his hair was white, crippled in his back, shuffling along next to trees. And the next thing that this guy knows, he's being dragged, there's no other way to put it, He's being dragged up alongside of one of the trees. The bark is rubbing against his skin. It hurts. For reasons unknown, the man is dragged up the bark, down the bark, up the bark, down the bark, and his skin, he begins to bleed. So there is that much skin that is coming off. He has no control over what is happening. He can't move his body. Then he is put back down on the ground, and there were allegedly eyewitnesses to this who saw him going up and down against the bark of the tree. And then to their complete astonishment, that's the story, in front of them, his white hair becomes black. All of his teeth come back into total, he goes from 60-something to 20. That's another famous case out of South America. You could say, well, that sounds cruel. That sounds like some advanced intelligences toying and playing with humans like they would with rats, or like humans play with rats in a cage. But this guy, allegedly in South America, was resurrected to youth and restored. The doctor on the balcony had a leg that had been crippled, was completely restored. So are we to be cynical in all cases? Is it possible that there are advanced intelligences that have been monitoring and watching the evolution of the biodiversity on this planet and many other planets that they look for, and that harvesting genetic material might also be to make sure that the biodiversity that of all living things that have been on this earth before ice ball conditions, before an asteroid, before that everything that has been on this planet might be in some gigantic zoological laboratory somewhere, like an entire planet, and it's numbered, this is Earth, this is all the life forms from Earth, and they are being preserved and kept healthy, because you never know what's going to happen to planet Earth. And humans currently are doing a great deal of damage to this planet, and it might be in the interests of planetary intelligences who know that biodiversity is the most important treasure of the universe, and that it is a major goal to keep taking genetic material from all life forms from this planet and putting it someplace where no matter what happens here, that it will be preserved. And it may be that's where you come back to that big word, survival. We are in a universe that in all directions demonstrates that there's a tremendous amount of violence. Suns are being born and die. This solar system has maybe another 4 billion, 5 billion years. And then the question is, how big will this sun go? And the projection for this particular yellow sun is it will continue from here on out. The sun will become more and more a player in the solar system, because it is reaching a point where the sun, by definition of the type of sun it is, will continue to expand. In that expansion, as we go forward in this solar system, there will be expansion, there will be increased heat. There will come a time, and I can't remember if it's 2 billion years from now or 3, but where the sun, where the Earth sits now around our yellow sun, it'll be completely consumed. There will not be an inner solar system. I hope people are understanding this. I'm not talking about some apocalyptic near-term event. I'm talking about the natural evolution of suns that we have studied in the universe. We have a sun that we're dependent upon for life. It has a bell-shaped curve of birth, adulthood, and then a decline to the death of a star. It's happening all over this universe. Our particular yellow sun, by definition of what we've studied, will continue to expand, I believe, like into something like a red giant. Yes. And in the process of doing that, in that's the part. We only have about 4 billion years left in the solar system, and I think it's 2 to 3 billion years out, a long time from now. But nevertheless, this is important to consider. Our Earth and Venus and Mercury, and I think Mars, will cease to exist. And that this has happened all over this universe. Solar systems become consumed in the death of stars. Therefore, there must be, and we're back again to that word, survival. No matter how many planets have advanced life, what Michio Kaku from New York College, where he teaches quantum physics and string theory, and talks about his projection is that there are type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4 civilizations in the universe, and we're at 0. And that if you are a type 4, you probably can engineer suns. Well, it's not comprehensible to you or me to even try to discuss it, but let's just say that you are at a point you might be able to engineer, but you're not going to be able to stop the natural processes of the deaths of suns. Therefore, it means that all over this universe, if there are type 3, type 4 civilizations that are extremely advanced, they too must always be looking for planets that they could move civilizations to, because stars die. And therefore, when you start looking at the real details and facts of the universe that we're in, and you realize that birth and death of stars and gamma ray bursts occur that are so mysterious, and on, that any intelligence knows that life is not guaranteed at any point where they are. And therefore, one of the biggest motives for trying to get out and explore and go beyond wherever your original life evolved would be because you've got to get backup systems. You've got to get backup places in a universe where suns blow up. And that right now we have a lot of time as a evolving human civilization, but that does not mean that those that may be advanced out there that are coming here haven't run out of time. That's one of the reasons why non-humans might be in our neck of the Milky Way galaxy could be because they are in need of finding biodiversity in planets and looking for places where they can go. And all of this is to just try to expand the landscape of thinking about the so-called UFO phenomena. And that we are talking about human governments who made policies in World War II to cover up what might be the most important fabric in the universe for our own survival, other advanced intelligences who might actually be able to help us.
Yes, well, I don't find any fault in what you're postulating there, as far as the possibility for other intelligent life forms and the possible motivations for the preservation of biodiversity. I mean, we're doing that on a small scale here on Earth as we speak with the various seed vaults that have been established around the world in an effort to save, what's left of our planets and things or plants and animals and what have you, in the case of a cataclysm of some kind here on the planet. So, it makes sense. It makes sense that if you're dealing with intelligent beings, that in some fashion or another they're going to attempt to do these things, because it's like an imperative for your species as it goes. When I look back in time, I see, it brings to my mind, when you talked about like an alien zoo being somewhere, it brings to my mind what Charles Fort said about us being owned by somebody else. It's not outside the realm of possibility, as far as I'm concerned, that we are the zoo here, right here on this planet.
Right.
That we may be nothing more than an evolving experiment right here, right now. And,
in fact, I would say that's probably closer to a truth than about anything else. And I'd sure like to know what it is that Homo sapien is providing in terms of a laboratory experiment. There was one fascinating interview. Well, not interview, it was a discussion because I couldn't do anything in terms of the person on the record. But it was back around 84, 85 time period. And this was a person that I had no question had a face-to-face with one of the non-humans in his official work. And his comment to me was, my understanding from the Ebens. Now, when you hear that phrase, that is what some of the government military people constantly refer to, almost a generic, but they mean the not the black-eyed androids. Most of those with the big black slanted eyes, from my point of view, those are all androids programmed and made by others. I'm talking about the non-black glassy-eyed ones. These are, they're sort of the eyes are a brown, a kind of deep chestnut brown color. And they probably have black vertical pupils. You get different takes from different people. That's why I'm not certain. But they are, from everybody's encounter with these types, they are organic, meaning they come across with tremendous power, tremendous telepathic control, that they might be the makers, let's say, of some of the big glassy-eyed androids. And that these, we'll call them, as Jim Sparks says, the real aliens. The government has always referred to this type as the extraterrestrial biological entities, and I'm not talking about blondes, and I'm not talking about reptoids or oranges or blues. I'm talking about a very specific gray-skinned, pear-shaped head with eyes that are not the black glassy slants. And some of these refinements and descriptions, you have to see a lot of sketches and you have to have talked with a lot of people to understand a lot of these distinctions. But what I'm coming to is this particular type, the Ebens, have had some kind of face-to-face ongoing communications with some people, I'm sure in the United States government, maybe England, others. And this man said, Linda, I had a discussion with and was talking about higher authority and about these beings, and said, and this is one thing I can tell you that I feel is very correct. The Ebens have told us, and this is the quote, we made you, we put you here, but you have to live it.
Hmm. Well, that's
and
certainly.
What would the end game be of that?
Indeed, what would it be? I mean, it's like setting a giant cosmic game into motion and then just sitting back and allowing it to play out by whatever means it will, and certainly.
And when we went to nuclear bombs in the 40s, I think alarm bells went off in a million directions. We can't let them do that.
Well, I definitely could see that being the case. I mean, we do have a long history and a mythology that has come down to us from ancient societies of for lack of a better term, extraterrestrial involvement here, and even with the idea of genetic manipulation and or the creation of biological life forms here on Earth for whatever purpose. And that particular scenario doesn't sound even in the least bit far-fetched as far as I'm concerned when it comes to trying to understand the phenomenon. And the fact that we may, in fact, just be an experiment that was put together for whatever reason, and for all we know, there may be thousands of such experiments. And I mean, it does sound like a Star Trek episode. I mean, it does, but in reality, I mean,
but which came first? Because we know that Roddenberry was one of the people, at least I've been told this by a number of people, Roddenberry was handpicked by somebody working for MJ-12 to specifically get what they were learning about extraterrestrial biological entities into a TV series that would basically condition the American public to these ideas of what you and I are talking about today, and that they would do it through science fiction, a series, and we know it as Star Trek.
Yes,
that's a fact, that Roddenberry was on the inside when he did all of the script evolutions for Star Trek.
I think there's plenty of evidence to indicate that Roddenberry had some insider knowledge when it came to the production of Star Trek and some other materials that he came in contact with. I've looked into this myself, and I think that that's pretty clear that some of what is being done in science fiction, media, film, and TV is directed in a way. It may be done, as a direct face-to-face sort of thing, where people say, "Hey, I want you to write about this," or make a movie about that, and this is going to be the plot, et cetera, et cetera. It may just be done through subtle manipulation or whatever. But there's an agenda that's being played out here, and you can see it evolve over time with different kinds of aliens and different agendas presenting themselves, and it sort of comes and goes in waves throughout science fiction writing and TV and movies, and I think you can see different agendas being played out by the type of product that is put out by Hollywood and by publishers and things of this nature. So, that's not a far stretch for me. In fact, it fits right in with my particular philosophy when it comes to science fiction and why we see science fiction so much turn out to be true. I mean, look at all of the things that Arthur C. Clarke wrote about. Look at the things that H.G. Wells wrote about, Jules Verne, and see that their so-called imagination becomes our reality in the future. And the way I look at it is that there's a direct interaction in some way. I've always looked at it as being something, a part of the collective consciousness, perhaps, of humanity. But there's no way to rule out some outside impinging force here. You can't do it. I mean, there's no way for you to prove one or the other. You can't say there isn't. You can't say there is. I mean, it's like trying to prove God is real or trying to prove God isn't real. I mean, an atheist has as much chance as a born again Christian to prove their position. Neither one can. So there's a lot of speculation that comes into here, and I think it's perfectly appropriate for it to be done, and different ideas to be brought forward, and different conclusions to be drawn, because there are so many things that we just don't understand. I mean, we don't even understand the broadest scope of physics yet. We're only getting down to some of the more nitty-gritty details now, and we've been studying this for a long time.
And dear sir, 95% of the universe is dark matter and dark energy. We are in the only knowable, it's actually not a full 5%, it's 4 point something. And one of the reasons for the Large Hadron Collider in Geneva is trying to figure out what in the world is going on in the other 95% of this universe. Can you believe that? The more I think about it, the more astounding it is that this planet, the solar system, the Milky Way galaxy, that which we can see is like a froth, like bubbles floating on an ocean, and there is this gigantic ocean about which we know nothing.
Yes, and I don't think that a lot of people realize whenever you look at the universe in general, I don't think that people can really grasp the enormous scope of everything as well, which is just so immense that it's beyond our ability to even grasp and understand. I mean, even the size of our own galaxy is so huge that, I mean, just trying to imagine.
13.7 billion light years.
I know, it's incredible when you think about the distances and things of this nature.
I did a story on Coast to Coast and at Earth Files on April 28th, and it was about this huge gamma ray burst that was picked up for the very first time on Earth consciousness on March 28th, 2011. And it was picked up by one of the satellites that is geared for exactly this, and that is to look for gamma ray bursts, which are considered extremely mysterious. And so far, lucky for us in the Milky Way galaxy in this solar system, most of the gamma ray bursts that have been notable, the scientists think that they are coming from largely more than 2 billion light years from where we are on Earth in almost all cases. Well, this one, March 28th, was finally measured by looking at other surrounding stars and so forth at 3.8 billion light years from Earth. But the astounding intensity of the energy that did not stop, did not fade out. Over a period of a day, it flared up 3 times, and then it did not trail off. It went to an intensity that was slightly lower than what it had been doing in these peaks. And we are now in May. I did that interview for the April 28th Earth Files in Coast to Coast on I think it was the 22nd. And on April 22nd, when I was talking with one of the astronomers studying this, they still, by that day, on that day when we did the interview, they were still getting data that was showing that this thing had been going on for 25 days at a sustained level of gamma ray radiation that is, this is their word, unprecedented in any cosmic knowledge. We've never seen anything like this before. And we had a fascinating discussion putting it into the perspective of the timeline of this big universe. Whatever this is, a white hole bursting through from another universe nearby, 2 black holes colliding and doing something unheard of, the collapse of, I mean, it goes on. That this might be the first time that humans have ever seen a big star being torn apart by a black hole. There's all kinds of hypotheses about what could be going on. Well, 3.8 billion light years is when this solar system was forming. So once you realize on March 28th, 2011, and our Earth is 4.5 billion years old in this solar system that is 4.5 billion, and we're obviously a little younger than the sun, but it's safe to use the words 4.5 billion years for the solar system. Then this event at 3.8 billion, which is about 4 billion, the solar system was really just finally coming into what we would consider what it's like now, right? And that is what helps me keep perspective, that we're in a universe where on any given night when you walk outside and you look up at the stars, there's no guarantee that the next night that a bunch of those stars could be gone. Meaning, we don't know how much of the universe is still there because so much is just reaching our retina and our satellites and our optics on any given 24-hour period of events that took place 3.8 billion, 4 billion, 7 billion. There was a gamma ray burst that was 7.5 billion light years away. This was only 3 years ago. That's halfway across the universe. And the energy was so huge that it was visible to a human naked eye for a brief moment. That's how much energy. And yet, that occurred. It occurred in real-time physics way before this solar system. It's halfway across the universe. The universe would have only been half the size that it is now, and there'd be no Earth, no solar systems like we have. And when you start thinking in these terms, and you realize we're in a universe where we are only seeing the photons that are reaching our retina and optics, we do not know how much is there or has already gone, that 95% of this universe is completely and totally unknown and referred to as dark energy and dark matter, and that, as Michio Kaku says, there is likely civilization types 1, 2, 3, and 4 in this immense universe. And those that can work with sun would be beyond our comprehension. We are babies in so many ways. And to me, that makes it exciting. I don't think there's anything to be afraid of from advanced intelligences, because it appears to me that what they cherish, honor, and try to protect and preserve is the biodiversity of life. And Homo sapien is one of those life forms.
Well, Linda, we're almost out of time. That's a really great insight. I think it's a really great place where we can end the show here today. Let me remind everybody that Linda Moulton Howe can be found at earthfiles.com, and you can also find her books there at earthfiles.com. Has a shop where she has her books for sale, and she has a couple of DVDs for sale: Strange Harvests in 1993 and A Strange Harvest from 1980 and 1989.
Right, that was the original.
Yes, and the book An Alien Harvest from 1989, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 1 and Volume 2, and Mysterious Lights and Crop Circles from 2002. So if you're interested in Linda's work, please check out her website and check out her books and her DVDs. And Linda, I want to thank you very much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate your insights, and I appreciate the hard work that you've done throughout the years to bring some of these issues to light. And I hope you'll continue the good fight in the future, and maybe we'll have a chance to talk again.
Yes, and thank you for trying to share what I think is some of the most important subjects with your net audience that we don't get on the 6 o'clock news of networks.
Yes. Well, thank you again, Linda, and I hope you have a great evening, and I will talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Okay, that was Linda Moulton Howe, and we're almost out of time. Please join me next week for another episode of the Stench of Truth Radio. And again, if you want to check out Linda Moulton Howe's work, check out earthfiles.com. She also appears on Coast to Coast AM. She has, without a doubt, done a lot of research into the field of paranormal, UFOs, the cattle mutilation mystery, which is something that has been ongoing for quite some time. As she pointed out, it's a mystery that is in our history. So lots of things to think about. And when it comes to the paranormal, there are different points of view, there are different ideologies, and there are different takes on what's going on. And I think it's important for us to keep an open mind and to embrace the various philosophies, to come to your own conclusions about what it is that's going on, where these beings are coming from, and what exactly is happening. So have a good evening, everybody. Catch me next week.